What if I told you that the most profound transformation doesn't happen when you add something to your life, but when you quietly remove the things that have been draining your soul for years? Stay with me, because what quantum psychology has revealed about awakened empaths will fundamentally shift how you understand personal evolution. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll recognize yourself in ways that will leave you speechless. Carl Jung said that becoming whole isn't about gaining more. It's about stripping away everything that was never truly yours to begin with. And nowhere is this more powerful than in the life of an empath who has reached what researchers now call quantum awakening. You see, most people think growth means accumulation, more knowledge, more connections, more effort. But Jung discovered something that shattered this illusion entirely. True psychological evolution is an act of subtraction, and empaths who reach this level of awareness begin quitting things that most people cling to for their entire lives. But here's what makes this absolutely terrifying for anyone trying to control them. The first thing a quantum awakened empath quits is the need to be understood. And this is where it gets fascinating. According to Carl Jung's research on psychological types, empaths spend the majority of their lives translating their inner world for people who lack the capacity to receive it. They over-explain. They justify their feelings. They bend themselves into shapes that others find comfortable. But when quantum awakening begins, something shifts at the deepest level of the psyche. Jung called this the dissolution of the persona. The mask they've been wearing to make others comfortable starts to crack. Not violently, not dramatically, slowly, quietly. One day they simply stop explaining why they need solitude. They stop defending their sensitivity. They stop apologizing for seeing what others refuse to see. And this silent withdrawal of explanation is more powerful than any argument they've ever made. But what comes next will completely redefine everything you thought you knew about emotional strength. The second thing they quit is chronic self-sacrifice. And here's where Jung's research becomes absolutely groundbreaking. Carl Jung discovered that empaths develop what he called a savior complex, not out of arrogance, but out of survival. As children, many empaths learned that their worth was directly tied to how much they gave, how much they healed, how much they absorbed other people's darkness so those people could feel light. But the quantum awakened empath begins to see this pattern with devastating clarity. They recognize that their endless giving wasn't generosity. It was a trauma response disguised as love. Jung called this shadow identification, when someone confuses their wound with their identity. And when that recognition hits, it changes everything. They don't stop giving overnight. That's not how empaths operate. They quit slowly. They start saying no to the small things first. The extra favor, the midnight phone call from someone who never calls during the day, the emotional labor that no one ever reciprocates, and each small no becomes a brick in the foundation of something Jung called authentic selfhood. But here's the part that will send chills down your spine. The third thing a quantum awakened empath quits is the addiction to potential. And this is perhaps the most devastating shift of all. According to Carl Jung's theory of individuation, empaths possess an extraordinary ability to see not just who someone is, but who they could become. They fall in love with potential. They build relationships with ghosts of future versions that may never materialize. They stay in situations that are destroying them because they can feel the possibility of something beautiful buried underneath the pain. But when quantum awakening activates, Jung's concept of radical acceptance takes hold. The empath stops loving people for who they might become and starts seeing them for who they consistently choose to be. This isn't cynicism. Jung understood that this is the highest form of emotional intelligence, the ability to honor reality without losing your capacity for hope. They quit investing in potential and start investing in patterns, and that single shift makes them virtually impossible to manipulate. What happens next is what Jung called the Great Reversal, and it changes the entire dynamic permanently. The fourth thing they quit is emotional hypervigilance. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people completely misunderstand the awakened empath. For years, perhaps decades, the empath has been scanning every room they enter, reading micro-expressions, detecting shifts in energy, anticipating emotional explosions before they happen. Jung identified this as a survival adaptation, the psyche's way of protecting itself in unpredictable environments. But here's what Jung discovered that most psychologists overlook entirely. This hypervigilance isn't a superpower, it's a prison. The quantum awakened empath recognizes that constantly monitoring other people's emotional states is exhausting. It's unsustainable. And most importantly, it keeps them tethered to the very dynamics they're trying to escape, so they quit. Not all at once, slowly. They stop reading the room and start trusting the room to reveal itself. They stop anticipating betrayal and start responding to reality. They stop scanning for danger and start resting in their own discernment. Jung called this the shift from reactive awareness to sovereign presence, and it's absolutely game-changing. The fifth thing a quantum awakened empath quits is the belief that they are too much. And this is where the psychology gets profoundly beautiful. Carl Jung said that the shadow contains not just our darkness, but our unlived greatness. For empaths, their intensity, their depth, their overwhelming capacity to feel has been labeled as too much by nearly everyone they've ever loved. Too sensitive, too emotional, too deep, too intense. These words become internalized scripts that play on repeat in the empath's psyche. But when quantum awakening occurs, something extraordinary happens. What Jung called the reclamation of the golden shadow begins. The empath stops shrinking. They stop dimming their light to make others comfortable. They stop treating their depth as a defect and start recognizing it as their greatest evolutionary advantage. They quit apologizing for the very thing that makes them extraordinary. And that quiet refusal to shrink anymore is more revolutionary than any confrontation. But here's the final transformation, and it's what Jung called the most magnificent stage of human development. The sixth thing a quantum awakened empath quits is the timeline of healing. According to Carl Jung's research on the individuation process, society imposes artificial deadlines on recovery. You should be over it by now. It's been long enough. Why are you still affected by that? The awakened empath rejects these external timelines entirely. They understand what Jung understood, that the psyche heals on its own schedule, that some wounds need years to fully integrate, that rushing the process doesn't create healing, it creates suppression disguised as progress. So they quit hurrying. They quit performing recovery for an audience. They quit pretending they're fine when they're still processing. And in that radical honesty with themselves, they find something Jung called the deepest form of self-respect, the willingness to honor your own process without apology. Carl Jung discovered that the most psychologically complete individuals are not those who healed the fastest, but those who healed the most honestly. The quantum awakened empath embodies this truth perfectly. They quit the things that kept them small, not with rage, not with announcements, not with dramatic exits. They quit slowly, quietly, deliberately, and by the time the world notices, they've already become someone entirely new. They've become what Jung called the individuated self, someone who no longer needs permission to be whole, someone who has transformed their deepest wounds into unshakable wisdom, someone who has learned that the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to abandon yourself ever again. And that, according to everything Carl Jung spent his lifetime discovering, is the most unstoppable force in human psychology. Not the person who fights back, but the person who has finally, quietly and completely stopped fighting themselves.